Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Rebecca Caldwell, and I've been a ranger at Jefferson National Forest for 14 years. Before that, I was a civil engineer. Good job, nice office, decent pay. Then the Henderson Bridge collapsed in '87, and I watched the news coverage for 3 days straight. 23 people died because someone missed a crack in the support beam. Someone like me. I quit 2 weeks later and applied to the Forest Service. Figured I could use my engineering background somewhere it might actually save lives instead of just pushing paper around a desk. Mount Rogers District suited me fine, quiet, remote. The kind of place where your biggest problems are usually fallen trees and lost hikers. The pay was terrible, but I could sleep at night. Most nights, anyway. November in the Virginia mountains comes on fast and mean. One day you're enjoying the last warm sunshine, the next you're scraping ice off your windshield at 5 in the morning. The locals know to get their business done before the first snow. After that, half the mountain roads close until spring. Iron Creek Bridge was always the first to go, 2,900 feet up, spanning a gorge that drops straight down to the creek below. Beautiful in summer, deadly in winter. My job was to do the final safety check before we put up the closure signs for the season. I didn't mind. I knew bridges, understood them. Steel and concrete follow rules. They don't surprise you if you know what to look for. The locals called it Screaming Bridge, but locals always have names for things. They said you could hear sounds coming from it at night. Wailing, they called it. Like someone crying for help. I'd heard it myself a few times, just wind moving through the cable stays. Basic physics. Air moving through narrow spaces makes noise. Nothing supernatural about it. Though I'll admit, it did sound unsettling, especially on cold nights when the wind picked up. But I'd been around long enough to know that mountains make strange sounds. Trees cracking in the frost, animals calling, wind doing weird things with the terrain. Your brain tries to make patterns out of random noise. That's all it was. I loaded my truck that morning with my usual gear. Inspection tools, climbing harness, flashlight, clipboard. The weather report said we had maybe 2 days before the first real storm hit. I needed to check the bridge supports, look for any ice damage, make sure everything was solid before we locked it down for 3 months. The drive up took about 40 minutes. Forest Service road, barely 2 lanes, winding through thick pine and oak. No other vehicles. This time of year, I usually had the mountain to myself. Most hikers cleared out by October. Too cold, too risky. Only the serious ones stayed, and they knew better than to mess with Iron Creek Bridge in winter. I pulled into the small gravel lot at the bridge entrance just after 7. Sun was barely up, casting long shadows through the trees. The bridge stretched out ahead of me, dark steel against the gray morning sky. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, really. Built in 1952, steel trestle design, strong enough to handle logging trucks back when this was active timber country. But there was something about it that morning, something that made me sit in my truck for an extra minute, hands on the steering wheel, just looking. The air felt wrong, too still. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Just silence, and the distant sound of water running far below in the gorge. I shook it off. Probably just the weather. Animals got quiet before storms. Everyone knew that. I grabbed my gear and stepped out. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting. My breath made clouds in the air. I zipped my jacket up higher and walked toward the bridge. That's when I noticed the first thing that didn't make sense. There were footprints in the frost on the bridge deck. Fresh ones, leading out to the middle of the span. But no footprints coming back. I stood there, staring at those footprints for a good 30 seconds. The logical part of my brain, the engineer part, started working through possibilities. Maybe someone walked out backward. Maybe the frost melted in spots. Maybe I was seeing things wrong in the early light. But I'd been doing this job long enough to trust my eyes. Those were fresh prints, maybe an hour old, and they only went one direction. I pulled out my radio. Dispatch, this is Ranger Caldwell at Iron Creek Bridge. You got any reports of vehicles up here this morning? Static crackled. Then Lisa's voice came through. She worked the night shift at the ranger station. Negative, Rebecca. Road's been quiet since yesterday afternoon. Why? Got some footprints on the bridge. Fresh. Might have a hiker in trouble. Want me to send backup? I looked down the bridge again. The footprints led about halfway across, then just stopped. Like whoever made them just vanished. Not yet. Let me check it out first. Probably nothing. Copy that. Call in when you know more. I clipped the radio back on my belt and started walking. My boots crunched on the frost. The bridge made small creaking sounds under my weight, normal sounds, the kind any bridge makes. Steel expanding and contracting with temperature changes. Nothing unusual. The footprints were small. Women's size, maybe men's 7. Tennis shoes, not hiking boots. That was weird right there. Nobody in their right mind wore tennis shoes up here in November. I followed them to the midpoint of the bridge. Then they just ended. No scuff marks, no signs of someone climbing over the railing. They just stopped. I leaned over the railing and looked down. The gorge dropped about 200 feet to where Iron Creek churned between the rocks. White water, fast-moving, ice cold. If someone went over, they wouldn't survive. But I didn't see anything down there. No body, no. Disturbed brush on the steep slopes. Hello? I called out. My voice echoed off the rock walls of the gorge. This is the Forest Service. If you're hurt, call out. Nothing. Just the wind starting to pick up, making that weird whistling sound through the bridge cables. Except this time, it didn't sound like wind. This time, it sounded like someone answering me. A long, drawn-out wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not words, just sound. Desperate and horrible. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the bridge, the trees on both sides, the slopes below. Nothing. Nobody. This is Ranger Caldwell, I said, louder this time. If you need help, show yourself. The wailing came again, closer. Definitely not wind. Wind doesn't sound that human, that anguished. I backed up toward my truck, hand on my radio. This was above my pay grade. This was... Something moved on the bridge behind me. I spun around. A figure stood at the far end, just standing there. Dark clothes, too far away to see details. Not moving, just watching me. Hey, I shouted. You okay? The figure didn't respond, didn't move. I started walking toward it. Sir? Ma'am? I'm a ranger. Are you hurt? As I got closer, I could make out more details. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like an old coat. Hood up, face in shadow, 50 feet away, 40, 30. I'm here to help, I said. Just talk to me. 20 feet. The figure raised its head. For just a second, I saw what was under that hood. Not a face. Not exactly. More like the memory of a face, pale and hollow and wrong. Then it was gone, just vanished. Like smoke and wind. 1 second there, next second nothing. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. Looked around wildly. Nobody, nothing, just me on the bridge, alone. And that wailing sound, getting louder, coming from the bridge itself now, vibrating through the steel, under my feet. I ran. Didn't think about it, didn't try to rationalize it, just ran back to my truck, threw my gear in the back, and got the hell out of there. I was 3 miles down the mountain before I stopped shaking enough to pick up my radio. Dispatch, this is Caldwell. I need to talk to the sheriff. Right now. Sheriff Tom Bradshaw met me at the ranger station 2 hours later. He was in his 60s, been working law enforcement in these mountains since before I was born. If anyone knew the real story about Iron Creek Bridge, it would be him. I told him everything. The footprints, the wailing, the figure that vanished. He listened without interrupting, his face getting more serious with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. How many deaths on that bridge? He asked. In the time you've been here. 3 that I know of, 2 suicides, 1 accident. 12, he said. 12 since they built it in 1952. And that's just the official count. Probably more that nobody reported. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Why so many? You know what was there before they built the bridge? I shook my head. Cherokee sacred site, burial ground. The tribe asked them not to build there, offered other locations. But this spot had the best sight lines, the best foundation rock. So they built it anyway. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Old newspaper clippings. First death was 3 months after it opened. Construction worker. Said he heard voices calling to him. Drove his truck right through the railing. He spread out more clippings. Different years, different people. But the same story kept repeating. People hearing sounds, seeing figures, then either jumping or crashing. The locals won't use it after dark, Bradshaw said. Haven't for years. They take the long way around, add an extra hour to their drive. They know. No. What? That something's wrong with that bridge, something that doesn't want us there. He looked at me directly. You're an engineer. You understand structures. Has that bridge ever had any real problems? Structural issues? I thought about it. No. It's one of the soundest bridges in the district. I inspect it twice a year. It's solid. Exactly. By all rights, it should be safe. But it's not. Because the problem isn't the bridge. It's what's underneath it. What was disturbed when they built it? I wanted to argue, wanted to say this was all just coincidence and superstition, but I'd seen that figure, heard that sound, and I knew what I'd felt standing on that bridge, pure primal fear. So what do? I asked. Close it. Put up the signs early. Keep people away until spring. And then what? Just let it keep happening? He didn't have an answer for that. I drove home that night thinking about those 12 deaths. 12 people who'd heard something, seen something, and didn't make it off that bridge alive. The phone rang at 2 a.m. I jerked awake, fumbled for the receiver. Rebecca? It was Lisa from dispatch. Her voice was shaking. We got a call. Car went off Iron Creek Bridge about an hour ago. My blood went cold. I closed that bridge. Put the signs up myself this afternoon. Signs are still there. Driver went around them. Witnesses say he was speeding, like he was running from something. Drove straight through the middle railing. Is he dead? Rescue team just confirmed. But Rebecca, there's something else. His radio was on when they found the car. Dispatcher heard him screaming before he went over. Said something was on the bridge with him. Something that wasn't human. I was already getting dressed. I'm on my way. Sheriff said to tell you, don't go up there alone. But I was already out the door. The bridge was lit up with emergency lights when I arrived. Fire trucks, ambulances, sheriff's department. They'd gotten the car out of the gorge. It was crushed, barely recognizable. Bradshaw saw me and walked over. Victim's name was James Porter, worked at the lumber yard in town, 32 years old, wife and 2 kids. What was he doing up here? Wife says he got a call around midnight. Wouldn't tell her who from, just said he had to go check on something at the bridge. Seemed agitated, scared. I looked up at the bridge. In the harsh emergency lights, it looked different. Colder. Like it was watching us. The dispatcher recording, I said. Can I hear it? Bradshaw hesitated, then nodded. He pulled out a small tape recorder and hit play. Static first. Then James Porter's voice, breathing hard. There's something here. Oh God, there's something on the bridge. Another voice came through the static. Not the dispatcher. Someone else. Or something else. That same wailing sound I'd heard that morning, but this time with words underneath. Faint, but there. Come home, come home, come home. Then screaming. The sound of tires squealing, metal crashing, then silence. I handed the recorder back with shaking hands. We need to shut this bridge down, permanently. Can't. It's federal property. Would take months of paperwork, environmental studies, alternative route surveys. We don't have that kind of time. Then what? He looked at me with tired eyes. You're the bridge expert. You tell me. I spent the next day at the county library, digging through old records. Property surveys, historical documents, newspaper archives. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, was in her 70s and had lived in the area her whole life. When she saw what I was researching, she disappeared into the back room and came out with a box of materials. My grandmother's papers, she said quietly. She was Cherokee. Documented a lot of the oral history before she died. Inside were journals, hand-drawn maps, and 8 photographs. One page stopped me cold. A sketch of the gorge where Iron Creek Bridge now stood. Labeled in careful handwriting, Sacred Crossing Place, Spirit Bridge, Do Not Disturb. What's a spirit bridge? I asked. Mrs. Chen sat down across from me. Cherokee believed certain places were doorways, places where the living world and spirit world touched. They built bridges, not physical ones, but spiritual ones, to help guide souls from one side to the other. When someone died, their spirit would cross at these places. And Iron Creek was one of these places? She nodded. One of the most important ones in this whole region. When they built that steel bridge, they didn't just disturb a burial ground. They blocked a crossing place. All those spirits trying to cross, they got trapped, confused, angry. I thought about the figure I'd seen. The wailing sounds, the way people were drawn to the bridge at night. The spirits are calling to people, I said slowly, trying to get them to cross, trying to use them as the bridge they don't have anymore. That's what my grandmother believed. Every death on that bridge makes it worse. Adds another trapped spirit, another voice calling out. I looked at the sketch again. In the corner, there were symbols. Cherokee writing. What's this say? Mrs. Chen studied it. It's a blessing, a way to open the crossing again, to let the spirits through. She looked at me seriously. But it would have to be done on the bridge itself. At midnight. During a storm. Why a storm? That's when the barrier between worlds is thinnest. When the spirits are strongest. The weather report that night said a major storm was coming. The first big winter storm of the season. It would hit around midnight. I knew what I had to do. Bradshaw tried to talk me out of it. So did Lisa. But I'd made up my mind. I was the one who understood that bridge. The one who'd seen the spirit. Maybe that meant I was the one who had to fix this. I copied the blessing symbols from Mrs. Chen's grandmother's journal. She explained the ritual to me 3 times, making sure I had it right. I would need to place the symbols at the 4 corners of the bridge, then speak the words at the center. At midnight, during the storm. It might not work, she warned. And it might be dangerous. These spirits have been trapped for over 30 years. They're not peaceful anymore. I have to try. I drove up to the bridge at 11. The storm was already starting, wind whipping through the trees, first snowflakes beginning to fall. I'd brought chalk to draw the symbols, a flashlight, and a copy of the blessing words. And my climbing harness. If things went wrong, I wasn't going over the edge like James Porter had. The bridge was dark, empty. The emergency lights from the night before were gone. I was alone. I started at the north corner, drawing the first symbol. The chalk glowed white against the dark steel. As soon as I finished it, I felt something change. The air got colder. The wind picked up. Second corner. The wailing started. Soft at first, then building. Coming from everywhere. Third corner. Snow was falling hard now, making it difficult to see. The bridge started to shake. Not from wind, from something else. Fourth corner. The wailing was loud now, almost deafening. I could see figures appearing along the bridge, dozens of them, pale shapes in the storm, moving toward me. I ran to the center of the bridge, pulled out the paper with the blessing words. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read it. The figures were getting closer. I could see their faces now, or the absence of faces. Hollow, desperate, reaching for me. The clock on my watch hit midnight. I started speaking the words. Cherokee words I didn't understand but had memorized. My voice was shaking, barely audible over the wind and the wailing. The spirits stopped moving, listening. I kept speaking. The blessing was long, each phrase careful and precise. One mistake and it wouldn't work. The bridge began to glow. Soft blue light, like moonlight, appearing between the steel beams. Growing brighter. The spirits turned toward the light, their wailing changed, less anguished now. More like recognition. I spoke the final words. The light exploded outward, filling the entire bridge, so bright I had to close my eyes. When I opened them again, the spirits were moving. Not toward me, toward the light. Walking into it, one by one they crossed through and disappeared. I saw James Porter. Saw the construction worker from 1952. Saw all 12 who had died here, and dozens more I'd never heard about. Old souls, trapped for decades. They were going home. The last spirit to cross stopped in front of me, looked at me with eyes that were finally at peace, then nodded once and stepped into the light. The glow faded. The wailing stopped. The storm began to clear. I was alone on the bridge, really alone this time. The oppressive weight that had hung over this place was gone. They reopened Iron Creek Bridge the following spring. I did a complete structural inspection first, even though I knew what I'd find. The bridge was sound, had always been sound, but something had changed. Everyone could feel it. Drivers reported feeling calm crossing it now. Peaceful. The locals started using it again, even at night. Nobody heard wailing anymore. Nobody saw figures in the dark. The county put up a small memorial plaque at the north end. In memory of those who crossed here. Simple. True. I still inspect that bridge twice a year. It's part of my route, part of my job. But I also check the chalk marks at each corner. They've faded some, but I redraw them every visit. Just in case. Sheriff Bradshaw retired 6 months later. Before he left, he gave me a file. Other bridges, he said. Other places in these mountains where the same thing happened. Sites that were disturbed, spirits that got trapped. Just in case you ever feel like the job isn't done. I have that file in my desk drawer. Haven't opened it yet. Not sure I want to know how many other places are out there, how many other spirits are waiting. But I know I will eventually, because that's what I do now. I understand bridges, both the kind you can see and the kind you can't. Mrs. Chen still calls me sometimes, shares more of her grandmother's stories, teaches me more Cherokee words and blessings. Just in case, she says. We both know what she means. I sleep better now than I used to. Even better than before I saw that figure on the bridge. Because now I know that some things can be fixed. Some wrongs can be made right. Even if it takes 30 years and a winter storm and an engineer who finally understood that not everything important can be measured with instruments and calculations. Last week, I got a call from a ranger in Tennessee. Young guy, new to the job. Said he'd heard I might know something about unusual bridge incidents. Said there was this old covered bridge in his district where strange things kept happening. I told him I'd drive down next month. Bring my gear. Share what I know. Because that's the other thing I've learned. I'm not the only ranger dealing with this. We're out here, scattered across these mountains, trying to protect both the living and the dead. Trying to make sure the old places are respected. Trying to keep the balance. Sometimes I stand on Iron Creek Bridge at sunset and watch the light fade over the gorge. It's beautiful. Peaceful. The way it was always meant to be. But I never forget what I learned. Never take it for granted. Some bridges carry cars. Some carry souls. And sometimes, if you're lucky and careful and respectful, you can help both kinds do their job. My name is Rebecca Caldwell. I've been a ranger at Jefferson National Forest for 14 years. And I'm a guardian now, of more than just trails and trees. Some nights, when the wind is right, I still hear echoes, not wailing anymore, something gentler, like voices saying thank you. That's when I know we did it right. When I know those spirits found their way home. And that's enough. My name is Daniel Ashford, and I've been a forest ranger for 21 years. In all that time, I never believed in ghosts or curses or any of that mountain superstition nonsense. I'm a scientist. I study plants. I collect samples, run tests, and write reports. That's what I do. But what happened in Ravens Hollow changed everything I thought I knew. It was May 1986 when I first heard about the deaths. I was sitting in my cabin at the Linville Gorge Ranger Station, drinking coffee and looking over my plant journals. The phone rang just after sunrise. Dan, we got a situation. It was my supervisor, Margaret Chen. Her voice sounded tight. 2 hikers found dead in Ravens Hollow. Sheriff wants you to head up there. What happened to them? Don't know yet. But Dan, they're saying it looks strange. I grabbed my pack and headed out within the hour. The trail to Ravens Hollow is 35 miles from the nearest road. You can't drive there. You can't even get close with a vehicle. It's one of the most isolated places in Pisgah National Forest, sitting at 3,800 feet in a gorge so deep and dark that locals won't go near it. The old folks around here tell stories about Ravens Hollow. They say a woman was killed there back in the 1700s, a healer who knew plants and medicines. The settlers called her a witch and hanged her from a black oak tree. They say she cursed the place with her dying breath, and anyone who harms her sacred plants will die screaming. I never paid attention to those stories. In my experience, Witch curses were usually just people accidentally poisoning themselves with plants they didn't understand. The hike took me most of the day. The trail wound through thick forest, past waterfalls and over rocky streams. Spring storms had been hitting hard that week, and the ground was soft and muddy. By late afternoon, I reached the ridge overlooking Raven's Hollow. The gorge spread out below me like a dark wound in the earth. Steep walls of gray stone dropped down into shadows. At the bottom, I could see the bright green of the hollow itself, a small valley filled with old trees and wild plants. A creek ran through the middle, flashing silver in the fading light. Something felt wrong about the place. The air was too still, too quiet. Even the birds seemed to avoid it. I made my way down the narrow trail into the hollow. The temperature dropped as I descended, and the light grew dim. By the time I reached the bottom, it felt like evening, even though the sun hadn't set yet. The sheriff's deputy, Tom Bradford, was waiting near the creek. He looked pale. "Glad you're here, Dan," he said. This is real bad." He led me through the trees to a small clearing. 2 bodies lay there, partially covered with tarps. Tom pulled back the covers. "I've seen death before. Animals, hikers who got hurt, even a suicide once. But this was different. The bodies were 2 men, maybe in their 30s. They were dressed in expensive hiking gear, the kind pharmaceutical scouts wear when they're out looking for plants to study. Their faces were twisted in expressions of pure terror. Their mouths hung open like they'd been screaming. But that wasn't the worst part. Their skin had turned a strange gray-green color. Dark veins spread across their faces and hands like black tree roots. Their fingernails were blue. Foam had dried around their lips. "Poison," I said quietly. "That's what we figured," Tom said. "But look at this." He pointed to their hands. Both men clutched bundles of plants, beautiful flowers with white petals and yellow centers. I recognized them immediately. "Doll's eyes," I said. "Actea pachypoda. Every part of it is deadly poisonous." Would they have eaten it? No professional would touch these without gloves. I leaned closer, careful not to disturb anything. These guys look like plant scouts. They would have known better. Tom shifted his weight nervously. "There's something else. Look around the clearing." I stood up and examined the area. The bodies lay in the center of a perfect circle. Around them, someone had arranged dozens of plants in a pattern. Doll's eyes, Virginia, snakeroot, white, baneberry, all deadly poisonous, all arranged with careful precision. "Who would do this?" Tom asked. I didn't answer. I was staring at something else. Just beyond the clearing, I could see what looked like an old garden. Rows of rare medicinal plants grew there in organized beds. Some of them were species I'd only read about in historical journals, plants that Appalachian healers used centuries ago. Someone was tending those plants, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. As the sun finally set, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. From somewhere in the darkening hollow came the harsh cry of ravens, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all calling at once. The sound echoed off the gorge walls like laughter. I stayed in Raven's Hollow that night. Tom wanted to leave before dark, but I needed to investigate the area while everything was still fresh. We set up camp near the creek, far enough from the bodies to be respectful but close enough to keep watch. Tom built a fire while I documented everything in my notebook. The plant arrangement, the bodies' positions, the strange garden. I took photos with my camera and collected samples of the surrounding vegetation. "You really think someone did this on purpose?" Tom asked as darkness fell. "Those plants didn't arrange themselves," I said, "and those men didn't just accidentally eat poison." "But who? We're 35 miles from anywhere." I didn't have an answer. The hollow felt empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. The ravens kept calling all night. Their cries echoed through the gorge in waves, sometimes close, sometimes distant. I'd never heard so many in one place before. Around midnight, Tom fell asleep by the fire. I sat up, writing notes and trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The pharmaceutical scouts had clearly been harvesting plants illegally. Their packs were full of rare specimens, carefully wrapped and labeled. They'd been targeting the garden I'd found, taking valuable medicinal plants that were protected by federal law. But who had stopped them? And how had they forced the men to handle poison? A branch snapped somewhere in the darkness beyond our firelight. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. The beam cut through the black forest, catching tree trunks and hanging moss. Nothing moved. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" The ravens suddenly went silent. The whole hollow became as quiet as a grave. Then I saw her. She stood at the edge of the clearing, just barely visible in my flashlight beam. A young woman, maybe 25, with long dark hair and pale skin. She wore a simple dress that looked handmade, rough fabric, old-fashioned style. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. I stood up slowly. "I'm Daniel Ashford, forest ranger. I'm investigating what happened to those 2 men. They got what they deserved." She stepped closer, into the firelight. Her eyes were dark and sharp. "They were stealing my plants." "Your plants?" "My garden, my medicine. They came to take it, to sell it, to destroy what I've protected for so long." Something about her didn't feel right. The way she moved was too smooth, too quiet. And her eyes, they seemed to reflect the firelight like an animal's eyes. "What's your name?" I asked. "I've had many names. The settlers called me witch. They called me devil. They hanged me from the black oak tree and left me to rot." She smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "But I came back. I always come back." My heart started pounding. This woman was clearly disturbed, maybe dangerous. But something else bothered me, something I couldn't quite name. "Did you poison those men?" I asked carefully. I showed them the truth of the plants they wanted to steal. They made their own choice to touch them, to taste them. I simply arranged the circumstances. Tom stirred by the fire, starting to wake up. The woman's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me. "You're different from the others," she said. "You respect the plants, you study them, but you don't destroy them. You might understand." "Understand what?" "Why this place must be protected, why those who come to harm it must be stopped." She turned and walked back toward the darkness. I started to follow, but she vanished between one step and the next, just disappeared into the shadows like smoke. "Wait," I called out. Tom jerked awake. "What? What's wrong? Did you see her?" I pointed toward where the woman had been standing. "The woman in the old dress?" Tom looked around, confused and scared. "I don't see anyone, Dan." I swept my flashlight across the area. The forest was empty. But where the woman had been standing, I found something that made my hands shake. Footprints. Bare feet in the mud, but they didn't look quite human. The toes were too long, too spread out, and they led toward the old garden, then simply stopped in the middle of a clear patch of ground. Like she'd vanished into thin air. "We need to leave," Tom said, staring at the footprints. "Right now." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Because I'd recognized something about that garden. The plants growing there shouldn't exist anymore. They were species that had gone extinct decades ago, varieties that only grew in historical records and old botanical drawings. Someone, or something, had been keeping them alive for a very long time. The ravens started calling again, louder than before. The sound surrounded us, coming from every direction. I looked up and saw them perched in the Roper Chaston. Trees around our camp, dozens of black birds, all watching us with bright, intelligent eyes. One raven landed on a branch directly above me. It tilted its head and made a sound that was almost like words. "Protect the hollow." Tom grabbed his pack. "I'm done, Dan. I'm hiking out at first light. You can stay if you want, but I'm not spending another minute in this cursed place." I didn't argue. Part of me wanted to run too. But another part, the scientist part, the part that needed to understand, wanted to stay. Wanted to find answers. I'd spent my whole career studying how Appalachian healers used plants. I'd read journals from the 1700s, interviewed old mountain families, collected oral histories. I knew the story of the Raven Hollow Witch, a woman named Sarah Blackwood who'd been executed in 1784 for consorting with darkness and poisoning good Christian folk with devil's herbs. The historical record said she'd been a healer, a woman who understood plants better than anyone else in the mountains. When people got sick, they came to her. When women had difficult births, she helped them. When children had fevers, she brewed teas that saved their lives. But the settlers feared what they didn't understand. When a man died after refusing her treatment and trying a different remedy, they blamed her. When crops failed one year, they blamed her. When anything went wrong, they blamed her. So they hanged her. According to the trial records, her last words were, "I curse this ground and all who would harm it. I cursed those who would take without asking, who would destroy without understanding. My ravens will watch, and my garden will remember. I'd always thought it was just the dramatic last words of a desperate woman. But now, sitting in the dark hollow with those blackbirds watching, and those impossible plants growing, and that strange woman's footprints leading nowhere, now I wasn't so sure. Tom left at dawn. I watched him hike up the trail out of the hollow, moving fast like something was chasing him. He never looked back. I should have gone with him, but I couldn't. I needed to understand what was happening here. I spent the morning examining the garden more carefully. The plants were arranged in careful rows, organized by type and purpose. Healing herbs in one section, pain relievers in another. Plants for fevers, for infections, for childbirth, for dozens of different ailments. Many of them I'd never seen alive before. Mountain ginseng from varieties that hadn't existed in 100 years. Ghost pipe flowers that shouldn't grow this far south. Bloodroot plants that were twice the size of any modern specimens. Someone had been caring for this garden for a very, very long time. I took photos and notes, documenting everything. As I worked, I kept feeling eyes on me. When I looked up, I'd see ravens watching from the trees. They followed me wherever I went in the hollow, never making a sound, just watching with those sharp black eyes. Around noon, I discovered something that changed everything. Behind the main garden, hidden by thick brush, I found a small cabin. It was ancient, rough-hewn logs darkened by centuries, a stone chimney, tiny windows. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. I pushed it open carefully. Inside was a single room, dim and dusty. A bed frame made of branches, a table, shelves lined with clay jars and bottles, and books. Dozens of leather-bound journals, their pages yellow with age. I picked up the nearest one and opened it carefully. The handwriting was old-fashioned, done with ink and quill. The first page read, Journal of Sarah Blackwood, Spring 1782. I have begun this record to preserve my knowledge of the healing plants, that it might not die with me. My hands trembled. This was her cabin, her journals, her handwriting from over 200 years ago. I spent hours reading. Sarah Blackwood had been a remarkable woman. She'd studied plants her whole life, learning from native healers and European herbalists. Her journals contained detailed drawings and descriptions of hundreds of species, along with recipes for medicines and notes on their effects. But the later entries grew dark. She wrote about the settlers' growing fear of her, about accusations and threats, about men who wanted to force her to share her secrets, to tell them where the valuable plants grew so they could harvest them all at once. She'd refused. The plants were sacred to her. She only took what was needed, always leaving enough to grow back. She understood balance and respect. The settlers didn't care about balance. They wanted profit. The final entry was dated the 31st of October 1784, the day before her execution. They will kill me tomorrow. I have seen it in the raven's eyes, but I will not let my garden die. I will not let the sacred plants be destroyed by those who see only gold. I have made my choice. I have drunk deep from the ghost pipe and the doll's eyes. I have eaten the roots of the snake-a-root. Tomorrow they will hang me, but death will not stop me. The plants and I are one. The hollow and I are one. I will return. I will always return. I set the journal down with shaking hands. She'd poisoned herself. Intentionally. With a mixture of plants that would, kill her? Transform her? Bind her spirit to this place? I didn't believe in ghosts. I was a scientist. But I was also reading the handwritten journals of a woman who'd been dead for 200 years, sitting in her cabin, surrounded by her impossible garden. A raven landed on the windowsill. It cocked its head and looked at me with disturbingly human intelligence. "You're beginning to understand," a voice said behind me. I spun around. The woman from last night stood in the doorway. In the daylight, I could see her more clearly. She looked young, but her eyes were ancient. Her dress was the same rough fabric, but cleaner than it should be after 2 centuries. "Sarah Blackwood," I said. She smiled. "You've read my journals. Good. Then you know why I'm here. Why I must stay. You can't be real. Ghosts don't exist. Don't they?" She stepped into the cabin. I drank the plant's poison willingly. I gave myself to them, and they gave me continuance. Not life, exactly, but not death either. I am part of the hollow now, part of the soil and the roots and the ravens. I backed away, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. This is impossible. Many impossible things are true. She moved to the shelves and touched one of the jars gently. I have protected this garden for over 200 years. I have kept the knowledge alive, and I have stopped those who would destroy it. By killing them. By showing them the truth of the plants they want to exploit. The same way I showed those scouts. Her eyes hardened. They came to steal endangered species. To dig up rare plants and sell them to pharmaceutical companies. They would have destroyed everything, taken it all, left nothing but bare ground. So you murdered them. I gave them a choice, touch the poison or leave the garden alone. They chose poorly. My back hit the wall. I was trapped in this tiny cabin with a woman, a thing that claimed to be a 200-year-old ghost. What do you want from me? I asked. You're different. You study the plants, but you respect them. You want to protect them, not destroy them. She stepped closer. I want you to understand, to help me keep this place safe. By killing anyone who comes here? Only those who would harm it. Only those who come with greed in their hearts and poison in their intentions. She reached out and touched my face. Her hand felt real, solid, but cold as death. You could help me, Daniel. You could make sure this garden is protected legally, officially. No more scouts, no more thieves, just the plants growing as they should. I jerked away from her touch. You're asking me to cover up murder. I'm asking you to protect something sacred. Her expression turned sad. But I know you won't. Not yet. You don't understand yet. She turned and walked out of the cabin. I followed her, my legs shaking. Wait, she was gone. Vanished between the cabin door and the garden. Only the ravens remained, watching from every tree. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. I grabbed my pack and headed for the trail as fast as I could move. I needed to get out of the hollow, to think, to process what I'd seen. But I only made it halfway up the trail before I found the body. A man lay across the path, his face twisted in agony. His skin had the same gray-green color as the scouts. His hands clutched bunches of doll's eyes. I recognized him. Frank Morrison, a plant dealer from Asheville. I'd caught him illegally harvesting ginseng a few years back. He'd come back, and the witch had found him. As I stood there staring at his body, ravens began to land around me. Dozens of them, forming a circle on the trail. Blocking my way up, blocking my way down. Sarah's voice drifted through the trees, though I couldn't see her. Now do you understand, Daniel? Now do you see why I must protect this place? They will never stop coming, never stop taking. Unless I stop them. The ravens began to move closer, tightening the circle. I don't want to hurt you, her voice continued. But I cannot let you leave. Not until you truly understand. Not until you make your choice. The birds moved closer still. Their eyes were her eyes. Their voices were her voice. I was trapped in Raven's Hollow with a vengeful spirit who had killed 3 people and would kill me too if I didn't find a way out. The ravens kept me surrounded for hours. Every time I tried to move, they would swarm closer, their wings beating around my head, their sharp beaks snapping near my face. I'd stumbled back down the trail, back into the hollow, back to Sarah's garden. That's where I was now, sitting on the ground with my back against a tree as the sun started to set again. The birds watched from every branch, waiting. I was going to die here. I knew it. Just like those scouts, just like Frank Morrison. I'd become another victim of the Raven Hollow curse. But as darkness fell, I started thinking clearly for the first time since this whole nightmare began. I'm a scientist. I solve problems. And I was missing something important. Sarah Blackwood wasn't just killing randomly. She had a purpose, a mission that had kept her bound to this place for over 2 centuries. She was protecting the plants. I pulled out her journals, which I'd grabbed from the cabin. I read them again by flashlight, looking for something I'd missed, and I found it in an entry from 1783. The mountain healers taught me that every plant has a spirit. We must ask permission before taking. We must give thanks. We must never take more than we need. The plants will provide for those who respect them, but they will punish those who abuse them. This is the old way. The sacred way. Sacred. That word appeared again and again in her journals. The sacred plants, the sacred knowledge, the sacred balance. Sarah wasn't a monster. She was a guardian, a protector of something she believed was holy. And the men she'd killed, they'd all come to exploit the hollow for profit, to take rare plants and sell them, to destroy what she'd spent her life protecting. I stood up slowly. The ravens stirred but didn't attack. "Sarah," I called out, "I need to talk to you." She appeared between the trees, the young woman with ancient eyes. "Have you made your choice?" "I have. But first, I need to understand something. Why me? Why bring me here and show me all this?" She moved closer. "Because you're the first person in 100 years who might actually listen. The first person who studies the plants to understand them, not to exploit them. The first person who might help me protect this place the right way." "The right way?" "I'm tired, Daniel." Her voice cracked, showing real emotion for the first time. "I've been bound to this hollow for so long, killing thieves and scouts. It never ends. They keep coming. Every year, more of them. I can't rest. I can't move on. I'm trapped here, protecting the garden forever. What if there was another way?" I said carefully. "What if we could protect the hollow legally? Make it an official conservation area. I could document the rare plants, get federal protection. No more thieves because there would be real consequences, real enforcement." She laughed bitterly. "I've heard promises before. The settlers promised to respect the land. They lied. I'm not them. And times have changed. We have laws now. Real protection for endangered species." I pulled out my ranger badge. "This isn't just a symbol. It means I have the authority to protect this place, to make sure it's left alone." Sarah studied me for a long moment. The ravens fell silent, waiting. "If I agree," she finally said, "and you break your word, I will kill you. I will make you suffer like I've made the others suffer. Do you understand?" I nodded. "I understand. But I won't break my word. These plants are too important. Your knowledge is too valuable. I'll spend the rest of my career making sure this place is protected." She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she looked different. Older. Tired. The weight of 200 years showed on her face. "I wanted to teach people," she said softly. "I wanted to share my knowledge of healing. I never wanted to be a killer. But they left me no choice. They forced me to become the witch they feared. You can stop now. Let me help you. If I stop, if I release my hold on this place, I will finally die. Really die. Move on to whatever comes next." She looked around the hollow, at her garden, at the trees she'd protected for so long. "I've been here so long. I don't remember what it was like to be truly alive. Then it's time to rest. Let me take over. Let me be the guardian now." The ravens began to call, a sound that was almost like crying. Sarah walked to the center of her garden and knelt down, placing her hands on the earth. "Will you make me a promise, Daniel Ashford?" "Yes. Promise me that you'll keep these plants alive. That you'll protect them, not for money or fame, but because they're sacred, because they're part of the old knowledge that must not be lost." "I promise. On my life, I promise." She smiled, and for the first time, it was a genuine smile. Young and relieved and peaceful. "Then I release this place to your care. Guard it well." She pressed her hands deeper into the soil. Her body began to change, becoming translucent, fading. The ravens took flight, circling above us in a great spiral. Their calls filled the hollow with sound not frightening now, but like a farewell. Sarah looked up at me one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she dissolved into the earth like morning mist, leaving nothing but a patch of flowers where she'd knelt. White flowers with yellow centers, doll's eyes, beautiful and deadly. The ravens flew away into the darkening sky. The hollow became silent, and I was alone with the garden, but I could feel something different in the air. The oppressive weight was gone. The hollow no longer felt cursed. It felt peaceful, sacred, just like Sarah had always tried to tell them. It took me 3 weeks to make it official. I documented every plant in Sarah's garden, photographed everything, and filed reports with every conservation agency I could find. I called in botanists from universities, showed them the extinct species growing there, proved that Ravens Hollow contained some of the rarest plants in North America. The federal government declared it a protected botanical research area. No public access, no harvesting, heavy fines for trespassing. I became the official caretaker. It's my job now to maintain the garden, to study the plants, to make sure Sarah's knowledge isn't lost. I moved into her cabin. I read her journals cover to cover and started writing my own, continuing her work. I learned her recipes and her techniques. I grew to understand the old ways of mountain healing. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I see ravens watching from the trees. They don't frighten me anymore. I think they're making sure I keep my promise. The garden is thriving. The plants grow strong and healthy. I take only what I need for my research, always leaving enough to grow back. I've started teaching others, carefully selected botanists and healers who understand the sacred nature of the work. The pharmaceutical scouts don't come anymore. Word got out about the mysterious deaths in Ravens Hollow. The locals still tell stories about the witch's curse. They say anyone who tries to steal from the hollow will die screaming. I let them believe it. It keeps the garden safe. I'm 48 now. I'll spend the rest of my life here protecting this place. And when I'm gone, I've already made arrangements for someone else to take over. The work will continue. The garden will survive. Sometimes I think about Sarah, about how she was forced to become something she never wanted to be, about how she suffered for over 200 years, protecting something sacred from those who couldn't understand its value. She was right. The plants are sacred, and they need guardians who understand that. I still don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I know that some places hold power beyond what science can explain. Some knowledge must be preserved, not for profit, but because it matters. Last week, I found a new flower growing in the garden, one I'd never seen in any of Sarah's journals. It had white petals and a yellow center, but it wasn't doll's eyes. When I examined it closer, I found a small note underneath, written on old paper in familiar handwriting. "Thank you for keeping your promise. The garden is yours now. Use it well. S.B." I keep that note in my journal. A reminder of the woman who became a monster to protect something she loved. A reminder of my responsibility. The hollow is quiet these days. Peaceful, the way it should be. But the ravens still watch. And I think they always will. Because some promises last forever. Some guardians never truly leave. And some knowledge is too sacred to ever let die. My name is Thomas Whitmore, and I've been a ranger in the Cherokee National Forest for 13 years. In that time, I've pulled lost hikers off cliffs, tracked black bears away from campgrounds, and documented more abandoned homesteads than I can count. The mountains hold a lot of history, some beautiful, some sad. But I never believed in ghosts. Not until Copper Creek. September 1971 started like any other autumn in East Tennessee. The leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the ridges in shades of gold and red. I was stationed in the Copper Creek Valley, one of the more isolated sections of the forest. My job included maintaining the old mining town of Copper Hill, or what was left of it. The place had been dead since 1923, when the mining company pulled out after a disaster nobody liked to talk about. I'd been assigned to check on the site after some teenagers reported weird stuff happening there. Kids loved to explore the ruins, looking for adventure and scaring each other with ghost stories. Usually, it was nothing, maybe some raccoons in the old buildings, or the wind playing tricks. I figured this would be the same. The drive up to Copper Hill took about an hour from the ranger station. The road was barely more than a dirt path, winding through thick forest that seemed to close in tighter every year. When I finally reached the turnoff, I noticed something right away. The trees looked sick. Their leaves were brown and curling, even though it was early September. The underbrush had died back, leaving bare patches of reddish dirt. I knew the history, of course. The mining company had dumped sulfur dioxide into the air for decades, poisoning everything for miles around. Even 50 years later, the land hadn't recovered. But seeing it always made my chest tighten. It looked wrong, like the earth itself was diseased. Copper Hill sat in a narrow valley, surrounded by dead hills. The town had once housed about 200 people, miners and their families. Now it was just a collection of rotting buildings. The company store, a few houses with caved-in roofs, and the old schoolhouse at the top of the hill. I parked my truck near the creek. The water ran orange with rust and copper, bubbling over rocks that were stained the color of dried blood. Nothing lived in that water, nothing could. The air was thick with fog, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Mountain fog is common in the fall, but this felt different. Heavier. It muffled sound, making everything feel far away and close at the same time. I grabbed my flashlight and clipboard, then headed toward the schoolhouse. That's where the teenagers said they'd seen something. According to their report, they'd heard children laughing inside the building, even though nobody else was there. When they went to investigate, they found the desks arranged in perfect rows, which was impossible, because the last time I'd been there, those desks were scattered and broken. The walk up the hill made my boots crunch on dead leaves and loose gravel. I could feel the weight of the place pressing down on me. Copper Hill had always been sad, but today it felt worse. Oppressive, like the fog was watching me. When I reached the schoolhouse, I stopped. The building was a 2-story structure with broken windows and a bell tower that leaned slightly to the left. The front door hung open on one hinge, swinging gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. I should mention something I learned early in my career. Abandoned places always make sounds. Wood settles. Metal expands and contracts. Animals move around inside. So, when I heard a faint creaking from inside the schoolhouse, I didn't think much of it. But then I heard something else. Singing. It was soft, almost too quiet to hear. A child's voice, humming a tune I didn't recognize. I stood there for a moment, listening. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Ranger Whitmore. Anyone in there?" The singing stopped. I waited, but there was only silence. I figured some kid was playing a prank, maybe hiding inside, trying to scare me. It wouldn't be the first time. I stepped through the doorway. The inside of the schoolhouse smelled like rot and mildew. Weak sunlight filtered through the broken windows, creating patches of light on the dusty floor. And there, in the main room, were the desks. They were arranged in perfect rows. I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. The teenagers had been telling the truth. Those desks had been scattered the last time I was here, maybe 6 months ago. Some were broken, some were missing legs. But now they sat in neat lines, as if someone had carefully placed them there. I walked between the rows, my footsteps echoing in the empty room. Dust covered everything, the desks, the floor, the old chalkboard at the front. But the dust on the desks had been disturbed. I could see small handprints on some of them, as if children had been sitting there, resting their hands on the wood. My heart started beating faster. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe some historians had come through and arranged things for photographs. Maybe the teenagers themselves had done it as part of their prank. But those handprints, they were so small. I heard a sound behind me, a quick patter of footsteps, like a child running. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just empty doorways and shadows. "This is federal property," I said, louder this time. "If someone's here, you need to show yourself now." No response. But the temperature had dropped. I could see my breath fogging in the air. That's when I noticed the chalkboard. Someone had written on it in fresh white chalk, "Help us." I stared at those words for a long moment. My training told me to stay calm, to look for logical explanations, but my instincts, the ones you develop after, the years in the wilderness, were screaming that something was very wrong. I pulled out my radio. Up here in the valley, reception was terrible, but I tried anyway. "Base, this is Whitmore. Do you copy?" Static. I adjusted the dial and tried again. Nothing but white noise. I decided to search the rest of the building. If someone was playing games, I'd find them. The schoolhouse had 4 classrooms on the ground floor and 2 more upstairs. I checked each one methodically, shining my flashlight into corners and closets. Every room was empty, but in each one, I found strange things. In the second classroom, children's drawings were scattered across the floor. They looked old, the paper was yellow and brittle, but they hadn't been there 6 months ago. I picked one up carefully. It showed a simple scene. Stick figures of children standing in front of a building. Above them, the roof was falling down, drawn in angry black scribbles. In the third classroom, I found shoes. Small leather shoes, the kind children wore in the 1920 seconds. They were arranged in pairs beneath the desks, as if their owners had just stepped out of them. My hands started to shake. I'm not a superstitious man, but this was wrong on every level. I thought about leaving, getting back to my truck and calling for backup. But I'm also stubborn, and I'd been a ranger long enough to know that running from a problem doesn't solve it. That's when I heard the bell. The schoolhouse bell, up in the tower. It rang once, a deep, hollow sound that echoed across the valley. I checked my watch, 3:47 p.m. Something about that time tickled my memory. I'd read about the mining disaster in the historical archives. The school had collapsed during class. I couldn't remember the exact time, but I had a sinking feeling it was close to 3:47. I headed for the stairs to the second floor. Each step creaked under my weight. The stairwell was dark, and my flashlight beam seemed weaker than it should be, barely cutting through the shadows. Upstairs, there were 2 larger classrooms and a storage room. The first classroom was destroyed. The roof had partially collapsed, letting in rain and weather. Dead leaves covered the floor. Nothing unusual there. The second classroom was different. The door was closed, which was strange because all the other doors were open or missing. I tried the handle. Locked. I put my shoulder against it and pushed. The wood was old and weak, and the door gave way easily. Inside, the room was pristine. No dust, no rot, no damage. The desks were perfect, the chalkboard clean. And sitting at those desks were children. Translucent. Shimmering. But definitely children. There were maybe 15 of them, all wearing old-fashioned clothes, girls in long dresses, boys in suspenders and caps. They sat perfectly still, hands folded on their desks, staring straight ahead at the chalkboard. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this wasn't possible, but there they were, as real as anything I'd ever seen. One of them, a little girl with dark braids, slowly turned her head toward me. Her eyes were empty, like looking into deep holes. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, all at once, they all turned to look at me. I stumbled backward, my flashlight clattering to the floor. The children stood up in perfect unison, their chairs scraping against the wood. They started walking toward me, their movements jerky and wrong, like puppets on strings. I ran. I don't remember much about getting down those stairs. My feet barely touched the steps. I burst out of the schoolhouse and into the fog, which had gotten thicker. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. Behind me, I heard them. Children's voices, calling out, "Wait, please wait, help us." I didn't stop until I reached my truck. My hands fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before I got the door open. I jumped inside and locked the doors, which I knew was stupid. What good would locks do against ghosts? But it made me feel better. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "More, do you copy, Whitmore?" I grabbed it with shaking hands. "Base, this is Whitmore." "I copy." "Jesus, Tom, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for an hour." "An hour?" I'd only been in the schoolhouse for maybe 20 minutes. "I'm at Copper Hill," I said. "Listen, I need backup up here. Something's—" I stopped. What was I going to say? That I'd seen ghost children? They'd think I was crazy. There's been some vandalism. I need someone to come up here and help me secure the site. "Can't do it today, Tom. We've got a situation down at Laurel Falls. Big search and rescue. Everyone's committed. Can it wait until tomorrow?" I looked at the schoolhouse through the fog. The building looked dark and lifeless now. No movement, no sounds. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the isolation and the creepy atmosphere had gotten to me. "Yeah," I said finally. "Tomorrow's fine." "You okay? You sound rattled." "I'm fine. Just... this place gives me the creeps." "Copper Hill?" "Yeah, I don't blame you. That whole valley is cursed. My grandfather used to say." "I'll check in tomorrow," I interrupted. "Whitmore out." I sat in my truck for a long time, trying to calm down. The logical part of my brain was working overtime, trying to explain what I'd seen. Hallucination, maybe. Bad food? Carbon monoxide from the truck's exhaust, somehow getting inside the building. Anything but the truth. But I knew what I'd seen. Those children were real. Or they had been real. Once. I should have left, should have driven straight back to the ranger station and never come back. But something made me stay. Maybe it was duty. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, deep down, I knew those children needed help, and running away wouldn't change that. I decided to check the old company store before I left. If I was going to report this properly, I needed to document everything. The store was a smaller building near the creek, its tin roof rusted through in places. The door was already open. Inside, the shelves were mostly bare, but I found something interesting, a stack of old newspapers from 1923. They looked fresh, as if they'd just been delivered that morning. The top one had a headline that made my blood run cold: Tragedy at Copper Hill. 47 children dead in school collapse. I picked it up carefully. The paper was yellowed, but readable. The article described how the schoolhouse roof had given way during class on September 18, 1923, at 3:47 p.m. The mining company had built the school cheap, using substandard materials. Everyone knew it was dangerous, but the company didn't care. Profits mattered more than safety. 47 children, crushed under falling timber and slate. The youngest was 5 years old. The oldest was 14. The article mentioned something else. The bodies had never been properly buried. The mining company had them interred in a mass grave somewhere on the property, unmarked and forgotten. When the disaster destroyed their reputation, they'd abandoned the town and destroyed most of the records. Those children had died alone and afraid, and then they'd been tossed in a hole like garbage. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. A boy stood in the doorway. He looked about 10 years old, wearing overalls and a cloth cap. He was translucent, like the others, but I could see him clearly. He pointed at the newspaper in my hands, then at me, then toward the schoolhouse. "You want me to know?" I said quietly. "You want someone to know what happened." The boy nodded slowly, then he faded away, like smoke in the wind. I didn't sleep that night. I drove back to my cabin at the ranger station, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those children staring at me with their empty eyes. I kept telling myself that there had to be a logical explanation, that stress or exhaustion had made me see things that weren't there. But I couldn't shake the memory of that little boy pointing at the newspaper, the desperation in his gesture. The next morning, I went to the forest headquarters and requested access to the historical archives. The secretary, an older woman named Martha, gave me a curious look but pulled out several boxes of documents related to Copper Hill. "Doing research?" she asked. "Something like that. Have we had any reports of people going missing up there recently?" Her expression changed. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Those teenagers mentioned some strange things." Martha lowered her voice. 3 weeks ago, a couple of college students went up there to take photographs. Urban exploration, or whatever they call it. They never came back. Their car was found near the creek, doors open, camera equipment scattered everywhere. Search teams looked for days, but found nothing. My stomach tightened. Nobody told me about this. It's been kept quiet. The families didn't want publicity, and honestly, there wasn't much to investigate. No signs of foul play, no evidence of what happened to them. They just vanished. I spent the next few hours going through the archives. I found more newspaper articles about the disaster, company memos that had been subpoenaed during the investigation, and most importantly, a hand-drawn map showing the location of the mass grave. It was on the north side of the schoolhouse, beneath what used to be the playground. There was something else, too. The mine foreman at the time, a man named Carlisle, had written a confession before he killed himself. In it, he described how the company executives had known about the school's structural problems but had refused to pay for repairs. They'd falsified inspection records and bribed local officials. When the roof collapsed, they'd covered up the evidence and buried the children quickly, before anyone could ask too many questions. Carlyle's note ended with a single line: "The children's voices haunt my dreams. God forgive me." I made copies of everything and drove back to Copper Hill. It was early afternoon and the fog was already rolling in. I'd brought equipment this time: a proper flashlight, a camera, measuring tape, and a shovel. If the children wanted to be found, I'd find them. The valley felt different during the day, but not better. The dead trees cast strange shadows, and the orange creek burbled with a sound like whispered conversations. I parked in the same spot and looked at the schoolhouse on the hill. It seemed to be watching me. I decided to check the area around the building first, looking for the location marked on the map. The north side was overgrown with dead brush, and the ground was uneven. I paced out the measurements from the map, trying to find the exact spot. That's when I heard the singing again. This time it was louder, clearer, multiple voices, children singing an old hymn. The sound came from inside the schoolhouse. I walked around to the front entrance, my camera ready. Inside, the main room had changed. The desks were arranged differently now, pushed to the walls. In the center of the floor, someone had drawn a circle in white chalk. Inside the circle were objects, old toys, a tarnished bell, small pieces of clothing. The singing stopped. I heard footsteps upstairs, multiple sets of small feet running back and forth. Then a ball bounced down the stairs, a red rubber ball, faded with age. It rolled across the floor and stopped at my feet. I picked it up. It felt solid and real. I was holding a physical object that had just been thrown by something that didn't exist. "I know what happened to you," I called out. "I read about the school collapse. I know it wasn't your fault." The footsteps stopped. In the oozy silence, I heard breathing small, quick breaths, like frightened children trying to stay quiet. "I want to help," I said. "But I need you to show me where you're buried. I can make sure people know the truth. I can make sure you're remembered." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a little girl appeared at the top of the stairs. She was the same one I'd seen before, with the dark braids. She beckoned for me to follow. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to climb those stairs. The girl waited at the top, then turned and walked down the hallway. She moved smoothly now, not jerky like before. She led me to the destroyed classroom, the one with the collapsed roof. In the corner, partially hidden by debris, was a door I hadn't noticed before. The girl pointed at it, then vanished. I moved the broken boards aside and pulled the door open. It led to a narrow staircase going down, probably to a basement or storage area. The stairs were intact, but everything below was pitch black. I clicked on my flashlight and descended carefully. The air got colder with each step, and I could see my breath forming thick clouds. At the bottom, I found myself in a large room with a dirt floor and stone walls. It had probably been used to store coal for heating the school. But it wasn't empty. They were all there. All 47 children, standing in rows just like they'd been sitting at their desks. They were more solid now, more visible. I could see the details of their faces, the fear in their eyes, the dirt and blood on their clothes. They didn't move. They just stared at me, waiting. Behind them, on the far wall, was a large crack in the stone. Through it, I could see disturbed earth. That was where they'd been buried, right beneath the school that had killed them. One child stepped forward, a boy with red hair and freckles. He opened his mouth, and this time, sound came out. His voice was distant and hollow, like an echo. "They forgot us, buried us like trash, told everyone we didn't matter." Another child, a small girl missing her front teeth. "My mama never knew where I was." She looked and looked. More voices joined in, a heartbreaking chorus. "Help us, please help us, we want to go home." I felt tears running down my face. "I will. I promise I will." The red-haired boy stepped closer. Others came. They laughed at us, called us stories, made fun. His face changed, becoming angry. We showed them we were real. My blood went cold. "The college students, what did you do to them?" "They're with us now," the boy said simply. "Down in the dark, they understand now." I backed toward the stairs. The children moved forward, surrounding me. Their expressions were desperate, pleading, but there was something else there too, something angry and vengeful. They'd been abandoned and forgotten for 50 years. They'd been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect them, and that pain had changed them. "I believe you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not like those students. I'm not here to mock you or take pictures. I want to help you rest." The children stopped advancing. The little girl with braids tilted her head, studying me. "Promise? I promise. I'll find your families. I'll tell everyone what really happened. I'll make sure you get proper graves with names on them. But you have to let me leave." The children looked at each other, communicating in some way I couldn't understand. Finally, they parted, creating a path to the stairs. I walked through them slowly, feeling the cold radiating from their spectral bodies. As I passed the red-haired boy, he grabbed my wrist. His hand was freezing, and I could barely feel it, but I could see his fingers gripping my skin. September 18th, he whispered. When we died. Come back then. Bring others. Help us go home. I nodded, unable to speak. He released my wrist, and I climbed the stairs as fast as I could without running. I didn't look back until I was outside the schoolhouse, standing in the weak afternoon sunlight. My wrist burned where the boy had touched me. I pushed up my sleeve and gasped. There were small fingerprints burned into my skin, like frostbite. The next 2 weeks were the busiest of my career. I contacted historians, genealogists, and local families whose ancestors had lived in Copperhill. I wrote reports, filed formal requests, and made phone calls to everyone I could think of. I showed them the newspaper articles, Carlyle's confession, and the map showing the burial location. Most importantly, I pushed for an official excavation. It took days of bureaucratic wrangling, but eventually the state agreed to send an archaeological team to Copperhill on September 18th, exactly 48 years after the disaster. I didn't tell anyone about the ghosts. I didn't mention the children I'd seen or the college students who'd vanished. I just focused on the historical injustice, the unmarked mass grave, and the families who'd never known where their children were buried. That was enough. But I couldn't stop thinking about what the red-haired boy had said. They're with us now, down in the dark. I went back to Copperhill 3 days before the excavation. I had to know what happened to those college students. I had to know what I was bringing other people into. The valley was quiet when I arrived. No fog this time, just clear autumn air and weak sunlight. I went straight to the schoolhouse and down to the basement where I'd seen the children. They weren't there. The room was empty, just dirt and stone. But the crack in the wall was bigger now, and I could smell fresh earth. I shined my flashlight through it and saw what lay beyond, a crude tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. I didn't want to go in there. Every instinct told me to turn around and leave. But I thought about those students, families, waiting for answers that might never come. I thought about promises I'd made. I squeezed through the crack, dragging my flashlight with me. The tunnel sloped downward, and the air was thick with the smell of copper and rot. After about 20 feet, it opened into a larger space, the original mass grave. The college students were there. They were sitting against the wall, eyes open, expressions frozen in terror. They were dead, but there was no sign of injury, no obvious cause of death. They looked like they'd simply stopped living. And they weren't alone. The bones of children were scattered everywhere, mixed with scraps of rotted clothing and broken toys. 47 small skeletons, discarded and forgotten. I heard a sound behind me and spun around. The children were there, filling the tunnel, blocking my exit. But they weren't threatening now. They looked sad. The little girl with braids knelt beside one of the skeletons. "That's me," she said quietly. "I was 7. My name was Sarah." The red-haired boy pointed to another skeleton. "I'm Michael. I was 10. One by one, the ghost children identified their remains, telling me their names and ages. They'd been holding on to this world for so long, trapped by anger and abandonment. But now that someone finally knew the truth, now that someone had come to help them, they were ready to let go. "Those students," I asked, "why did you kill them?" Michael's expression darkened. "They came down here with lights and cameras. They stepped on our bones. Laughed and said we were just a story. We got angry." He looked at his translucent hands. "We didn't mean to hurt them so bad. But when we touched them, they just stopped. Like we pulled something out of them." I understood then. The children weren't evil. They were just children, hurt, scared, and forgotten. Their anger had given them power, but it was the kind of power that destroyed without meaning to. They were trapped in the moment of their death, reliving that terror over and over, and it had changed them into something dangerous. "The excavation is in 3 days," I told them. "Archaeologists are coming. They'll treat your remains with respect. They'll identify each of you and notify your families. You'll get proper burials with headstones." Sarah looked up at me with those empty eyes. "Will you be there?" "Yes." "Will you remember our names?" "Every single one." The children smiled, genuine smiles, like the weight of the world had lifted from their small shoulders. Then, one by one, they began to fade, becoming more translucent with each passing moment. But before they disappeared completely, Sarah touched my hand. It was cold, but gentle. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not forgetting us." I climbed out of that grave with tears streaming down my face. I reported the discovery of the college students' bodies, claiming I'd found them during a preliminary survey of the site. I didn't mention the ghosts or what really happened to those young people. Some truths are too strange to share. September 18th, 1971 was a clear, cool day. The archaeological team arrived at dawn with equipment, careful hands, and respectful attitudes. I'd briefed them thoroughly on the historical background, and they treated the site like the crime scene it was. Over the next week, they carefully excavated the mass grave. They found all 47 sets of remains, along with personal items that helped identify each child. Local families were notified, tears were shed, and arrangements were made for proper burials. The story made national news. The mining company's cover-up was exposed, Carlisle's confession was published, and historians wrote articles about corporate negligence and forgotten tragedies. The children of Copper Hill weren't forgotten anymore. On the last day of the excavation, as the sun was setting, I stood alone near the schoolhouse. I felt different, lighter, somehow. The oppressive weight that had hung over the valley was gone. The air felt cleaner, even though the dead trees and poisoned creek remained. I heard a sound behind me, children laughing, but it wasn't scary this time. It sounded joyful, free. When I turned around, I saw them one last time. 47 translucent children, holding hands, smiling. Sarah waved at me, and then they all walked into the sunset, fading away until they were gone. They'd found peace. They'd gone home. That was 5 years ago. The schoolhouse at Copper Hill was eventually torn down for safety reasons, but a memorial was built in its place. 47 marble headstones now stand in neat rows, each engraved with a child's name, age, and the date they died. Families visit regularly, leaving flowers and toys. The mining company's descendants paid for the memorial as part of a settlement with the victims' families. It wasn't enough to make up for what happened, but it was something. I still work as a ranger in Cherokee National Forest, though I requested a transfer away from Copper Creek Valley. I couldn't stay there after everything that happened. The memories were too heavy, and I needed distance to process what I'd experienced. People ask me sometimes if I believe in ghosts now. I usually deflect the question, making jokes about spending too much time alone in the woods, but the truth is complicated. I don't know if what I saw was really the spirits of dead children, or if it was something my mind created to cope with the tragedy of that place. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the important thing is that those children finally got the justice and remembrance they deserved. I still have scars on my wrist where Michael grabbed me. The marks never fully healed, 5 small white fingerprints, permanently burned into my skin. Doctors can't explain it. They said it looks like frostbite, but frostbite doesn't leave fingerprints. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about Sarah and the others. In these dreams, they're playing in a sunlit meadow somewhere, laughing and happy. They look the same as they did as ghosts, but different, too whole and alive in a way they hadn't been for 50 years. When I wake up, I choose to believe those dreams are real, that they're showing me where the children are now. The college students' families got closure too. Their bodies were returned home for burial, and the official report listed their deaths as accidental. They'd gotten lost in the old mine tunnels, overcome by bad air or a collapse. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was a truth their families could accept. I never went back to Copper Hill after the excavation. I heard from other rangers that the valley has changed. Plants are starting to grow again, even in the poisoned soil. Animals have returned to the creek. It's like the land itself is healing now that the children are at rest. Martha, the secretary who first told me about the missing students, stopped me in the hallway a few months after everything was resolved. She put a hand on my shoulder and said, "I don't know what really happened up there, Tom, but I know it was more than what you wrote in your reports. Whatever it was, you did a good thing. Those children deserved better." I just nodded. There was nothing else to say. These days, I focus on the living. I help lost hikers, protect wildlife, and maintain the forest trails. But I've learned something important. The past doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes the dead need us to remember them, to bear witness to their suffering, to make sure their stories aren't erased by time and convenience. And sometimes, if you listen carefully on quiet autumn evenings, you can hear children laughing in the distance. Not the desperate, pleading laughter I heard at Copper Hill, but genuine joy, the sound of kids who are finally, truly free. I like to think they're playing somewhere beyond our sight, somewhere better than the dark valley where they died. I hope they've forgiven the adults who failed them. I hope they know that at least one person kept his promise. Every September 18th, I visit the memorial at Copper Hill. I bring 47 flowers, one for each child, and I read their names aloud. Sarah, Michael, all of them. It's the least I can do, because I promised I would remember. And some promises you keep forever. My name is Margaret Brennan, and I've been a ranger at Monongahela National Forest for 19 years. I've seen a lot in that time: lost hikers, bear attacks, illegal hunting, even a few deaths. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened in December of 1983. I'm not the kind of person who believes in monsters. I have a PhD in ecology. I study facts, data, numbers. When locals told me stories about the beast of the sods, I'd smile politely and explain that they'd probably seen a black bear standing on its hind legs. Black bears can get pretty big in Appalachia, 7 feet tall sometimes. In the dark, with fear pumping through your veins, sure, it might look like something else. That's what I always said. I was wrong. The Dolly Sods Wilderness sits on top of a plateau, 4,000 feet up. It's not like the rest of West Virginia, no thick forests or rolling hills. Up there, it's more like a different world. The ground is covered in spongy bog moss. The trees are stunted, twisted spruce that look like they're trying to crawl away from something. Rocky outcrops jut up through the earth like broken teeth. On a clear day, it's beautiful in a harsh, lonely way. But when the weather turns bad, it becomes the most isolated place you can imagine. That December, we got hit with the worst ice storm in 50 years. I was alone at the Dobbin Grade Ranger Station, a small cabin that served as a checkpoint for hikers. The storm had knocked out the power 3 days earlier. My radio only worked for a few hours a day when I could run the generator, and even then, the ice was playing hell with the signal. I didn't mind being alone. I'd always preferred the company of animals to most people. My ex-husband used to say I loved the forest more than I loved him. He wasn't entirely wrong. After the divorce, I threw myself into my work. I studied the predator populations, tracked the bears and coyotes, documented their behavior. The animals made sense to me. They followed patterns, rules, unlike people. On December 18th, I got a call on the radio. A group of 4 hikers had gone missing. They'd checked in at the visitor center 3 days ago, saying they planned to camp near the Red Creek area. They should have been back by now. With the storm, everyone was worried. "Margaret, can you check the northern trails?" The voice was Tom Haskell, my supervisor. He sounded tired. "I know it's rough out there, but you're the closest." "I'll do what I can," I said. "But Tom, visibility is maybe 20 feet. And it's getting worse. Just do a sweep of the main routes. If you don't find anything by nightfall, come back. Don't be a hero." I packed my gear, first aid kit, flares, extra batteries, rope, emergency blanket. I loaded my rifle too, though I hoped I wouldn't need it. The temperature was already 10 below zero, and the wind made it feel even colder. I'd dealt with hypothermia cases before. If those hikers were still out there, they were in serious trouble. The trail was treacherous. Ice covered everything. Each step required concentration. The wind howled through the stunted spruce trees, making them creak and groan like they were in pain. I'd hiked these trails hundreds of times, but today they felt different, wrong somehow. It took me 2 hours to reach the Red Creek area. No sign of the hikers. No tracks, no camping gear, nothing. The snow had covered everything, and the ice storm had erased whatever traces they might have left. I was about to turn back when I saw something that made me stop. A tree had been snapped in half. Not broken by the wind snapped. The trunk was maybe 8 inches thick, and something had broken it like a toothpick. The break was fresh, I could tell by the exposed wood, and it was about 7 feet off the ground. I stood there, staring at it. Bears don't do that. Even the biggest bears don't have that kind of strength. And they certainly don't break trees that high up. I looked around, my heart starting to beat faster. The wind had died down for a moment, and in the sudden quiet, I heard something. A sound like breathing. Heavy, raspy breathing. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded small in the vast whiteness. Is someone there? I'm a park ranger. If you need help, call out. Nothing. Just the wind picking up again, howling through the rocks. I told myself I was being stupid. The breathing was probably just the wind through a crack in the stones. The tree had been damaged by ice and finally gave way. There were logical explanations for everything, but as I started back toward the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, my hands were shaking, and it wasn't just from the cold. I kept looking over my shoulder, but I never saw anything. Just the white landscape, the twisted trees, and the gathering darkness. I made it back to the station just as night fell. My hands were so cold I could barely turn the key in the lock. Inside, I got the generator running and made myself some coffee. The warmth of the cabin felt like a blessing. I tried the radio, but all I got was static. The ice storm was still messing with the signal. I'd have to try again in the morning. I couldn't stop thinking about that broken tree. And the breathing sound. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but my scientific brain wouldn't let it go. I pulled out my field journal and wrote down what I'd seen, trying to make sense of it. That's when I heard the first scream. It was distant, maybe half a mile away, but it was definitely human. A man's voice, full of terror. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, then cut off abruptly. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside. "Hello!" I shouted. "Where are you?" Another scream, this one closer. But something was wrong. The voice sounded strange, like it was being played on a broken record. The words were, stretched out, distorted. "Help me." Every instinct told me not to go toward that voice. But I was a ranger. Someone was in trouble. I had to help. I followed the sound, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The snow crunched under my boots. My breath came out in white clouds. The screaming stopped. I stood in a small clearing, my light sweeping back and forth. Nothing. No tracks in the snow except my own. No sign of anyone. "This isn't funny," I yelled. "If you need help, show yourself." Then I saw the blood. It was splattered across the snow in a wide arc, bright red against the white. Fresh blood, still steaming slightly in the freezing air. A lot of it. Too much for someone to survive losing. I moved closer, my rifle raised. The blood trail led toward a cluster of rocks. I could see something lying in the snow beyond them. It was a boot. A hiking boot, still laced up, and there was a foot inside it. I felt my stomach turn. I'd seen death before: car accidents, heart attacks, even a few animal attacks. But this was different. The foot had been torn off, not cut. Torn. Like something had just ripped it away from the leg. I backed away, my radio crackling to life on my belt. "Margaret. Margaret, can you hear me?" Tom's voice, broken up by static. "Tom." I grabbed the radio. "Tom, I found something. It's bad. One of the hikers, I think. He's been killed. Attacked by something." "Say, again, can't hear." "There's something out here, Tom. Something dangerous." The radio went dead. I heard movement behind me. I spun around, my flashlight catching something at the edge of the clearing. Just for a second, something tall. Too tall. With long arms and a shape that wasn't quite right. Then, it was gone. I ran. I don't remember making the decision to run. My body just did it, pure survival instinct. I crashed through the snow, slipping on ice, branches whipping my face. Behind me, I heard something following. Not running. Walking. Taking its time. Because it knew I couldn't escape. I made it to the station and slammed the door, throwing the deadbolt. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the rifle. I pushed the table against the door, then the chairs, anything heavy I could move. Outside, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. Then, silence. I waited by the window, my rifle aimed at the door. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour, nothing. Finally, I allowed myself to breathe. Maybe it had left. Maybe the window exploded inward. I screamed and fired the rifle. The boom was deafening in the small cabin. I didn't know if I hit anything. I couldn't see anything except broken glass and darkness and something moving. I fired again. And again. The bullets didn't stop it. A hand reached through the window. No, not a hand. Something with too many joints, covered in pale, stretched skin. The fingers were impossibly long, ending in black claws. I grabbed the fire extinguisher and sprayed it through the window. White foam filled the air. I heard a sound like a hiss, and the hand pulled back. I didn't waste time. I ran to the back of the cabin, to the small storage room. There was a trapdoor there, leading to a crawl space beneath the station. I'd never used it, but I knew it was there. I pulled the trapdoor open and dropped down into the darkness. Above me, I heard the thing enter the cabin. It was searching. I could hear furniture being thrown, wood splintering. I crawled through the narrow space, my elbows scraping on frozen ground. There was an opening, about 30 feet away, a ventilation grate. If I could reach it, I could get out. The thing above me stopped moving. Then I heard it. That breathing sound again. Right above my head. It knew where I was. The floorboards exploded. A hand reached down, those long fingers grasping for me. I screamed and kicked at it, crawling faster. I reached the grate and kicked it open. Cold air rushed in. I squeezed through, emerged into the snow outside. I ran again. Not back to the trails. Into the woods, into the darkness, anywhere to get away from that thing. I don't know how long I ran. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Time stopped meaning anything. I just knew I had to keep moving. Eventually, I couldn't run anymore. My lungs burned, my legs felt like rubber. I collapsed against a rock outcropping, gasping for air. That's when I heard the voices. "Margaret, Margaret, where are you?" It sounded like Tom, but I knew it wasn't. I'd heard that trick before. "We're here to help you, Margaret. Just come out where we can see you." Now it sounded like my ex-husband. The thing was using voices from my memory somehow, playing them back to me. I stayed quiet, my hand over my mouth to muffle my breathing. The voice changed again. This time it was my mother. She'd been dead for 10 years. "Sweetie, you're being silly. Come out, everything's okay." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Couldn't. Had to stay quiet. After a while, the voices stopped. I waited until I couldn't feel my feet anymore from the cold. Then I carefully stood up and looked around. I'd run further than I thought. I could see lights in the distance. Another cabin. The old research station that had been built in the 60s and abandoned in the 70s. It wasn't much, but it had walls and a door. I made my way toward it, moving carefully. Every shadow looked like that thing. Every sound made me jump. The research station door was unlocked. I went inside and found it was in better shape than I expected. There was even some old furniture, a desk, a few chairs, a metal cabinet. I checked the cabinet. Inside, I found some old files, a first aid kit, and thank God a box of flares. Someone had left them here decades ago, but they might still work. I also found something else, a journal. I opened it, using my flashlight to read. The handwriting was shaky, hard to read. The dates were from 1952. Asterisk. 3rd week here. The men are getting desperate. Supplies ran out 5 days ago. Carl says he saw something in the woods, something watching us. I told him he's imagining things, but I'm starting to wonder. Asterisk. I flipped through more pages. Asterisk. Carl is dead. We found him in the morning. He'd been torn apart. Johann says we need to leave, but the snow is too deep. We're trapped. Asterisk. Asterisk. Only 3 of us left. Johann shot himself yesterday. Said he couldn't stand it anymore. Said the hunger was too much. I'm starting to understand what he meant. The hunger isn't just in our stomachs, it's in our minds. It makes you think terrible things. Asterisk. The last entry was just one sentence, written so hard it had torn through the paper. Asterisk. God forgive me for what I've become. Asterisk. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. This place had been a German POW camp during World War II. The prisoners had been left here during a bad winter, cut off from supplies. And something had happened to them, something terrible. A sound outside made me freeze, scratching. Something was scratching at the walls. Then I heard the voice again. But this time it wasn't mimicking anyone I knew. It was speaking German. Words I didn't understand, but the tone was clear. Begging, pleading. I moved away from the wall. The scratching moved with me, following me around the cabin. Then it stopped. I waited, nothing. I moved to the window and carefully looked out. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized the thing was right there. Right outside the window, looking in. but I could see it clearly for the first time. It had been human once. I could still see traces of it, the basic shape of a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, but it had been stretched and twisted. It was at least 8 feet tall, impossibly thin. The skin was pale and tight, like leather stretched over bones. The face was the worst part. The jaw had extended forward, filled with teeth that looked like they'd been filed to points. The eyes were huge and yellow, like a cat's eyes, but with something human still trapped inside them. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, but I could see inside. See the rows of teeth, the black tongue, the throat that seemed to go down forever. Then it smiled. Actually smiled, like it was enjoying my terror. I raised my rifle and fired through the window. The glass shattered. The thing didn't even flinch. It just kept smiling. I fired again. The bullet hit it in the chest. I saw the impact, saw the wound. But the thing didn't fall, didn't even step back. It reached through the broken window, those long arms stretching further than should be possible. I dropped the rifle and grabbed one of the flares from the box. I struck it against the wall, praying it would still work. It lit. Bright red light filled the cabin. The thing recoiled. It pulled its arms back and moved away from the window, making a sound like a hiss mixed with a scream. It was afraid of the light, or the fire, or both. I grabbed more flares and lit them, throwing them through the window. The thing backed away further, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there, holding the last flare, knowing I only had a few minutes before it burned out. Then I'd be in the dark again. And the thing would come back. I had to think, had to figure this out. The journal, the German prisoners. One of them had done something terrible, had eaten the others maybe, and that had turned him into this thing. The local legends called it the Beast. But I knew what it really was. A Wendigo. A creature from Native American folklore. A human who'd resorted to cannibalism and been transformed into a monster, cursed with eternal hunger that could never be satisfied. I'd always thought those stories were just myths, but standing there with a flare in my hand, watching the shadows for movement, I knew the truth. Some myths are real, and some monsters used to be human. The flare sputtered and died. Darkness closed in around me like a fist. I grabbed another one, lit it quickly. My hands were steadier now. Fear had been replaced by something else. Not courage exactly. More like determination. I was going to survive this. I had to. I couldn't stay in the research station. Eventually, I'd run out of flares. I needed to get back to my station. To the radio. If I could call for help, maybe they could send a helicopter. Even in this weather, they might try. The problem was the thing outside. It was smart. It had proven that. It wouldn't just let me walk away, unless I made it chase me. I looked around the cabin, forming a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was all I had. I took off my heavy jacket and stuffed it with papers from the desk, trying to make it look like a body. Then I propped it up in one of the chairs, facing away from the door. In the dim light, it might fool the thing. For a few seconds anyway. I grabbed all the remaining flares, 6 of them, and moved to the back window. It was small, but I could fit through it. I opened it as quietly as I could. Then I lit 3 flares and threw them through the front door, which I'd left slightly open. The thing came for them immediately. I heard it crash through the doorway, heard it tearing apart the jacket I'd left behind. I didn't wait. I climbed through the back window and ran. Behind me, I heard a roar of rage. It had figured out my trick. Now it would be angry, and angry meant dangerous, but angry also meant it might make mistakes. I ran toward the cliffs. There was a trail there that led down to a lower plateau. The trail was treacherous in good weather. In the ice and dark, it was practically suicide. But I knew the thing would follow, and maybe, just maybe, I could use that. I could hear it behind me, closer now. It wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. It was just coming, crashing through the brush and snow. I reached the cliff edge and started down the trail. It was steep, almost vertical in places. Ice made every step a gamble. I used my hands to grip the rocks, ignoring the pain as the frozen stone tore my gloves. Halfway down, I looked up. The thing was at the top of the cliff, looking down at me. Those yellow eyes glowed in the darkness. Then it started climbing down. Not carefully, like I had. It just dropped, using those long arms to grab rocks, moving like a spider down a wall. It was going to catch me. I reached a small ledge and stopped. This was it. This was where I'd make my stand. I pulled out the last 3 flares and lit them all at once. Bright red light flooded the cliff face. The thing stopped about 20 feet above me. It hissed, shielding those huge eyes from the light. "You were human once," I said. My voice was shaking, but I kept talking. "You were one of those prisoners. You got hungry. You did something terrible, and it changed you." The thing tilted its head, like it was listening or remembering. "But you're still in there somewhere," I continued. "I can see it. In your eyes, you're still human enough to know what you've become, and you hate it." The thing made a sound, not a hiss this time. Something else, something that might have been words once, long ago. "I can't save you," I said, "but I can end this." I didn't know if I was telling the truth, didn't know if this would work, but I had to try. I threw the flares up toward the thing. They arced through the air, trailing red sparks. The thing tried to dodge, but there wasn't anywhere to go. The flares landed on the ice-covered rocks around it, and the ice began to crack. The weight of the thing combined with the sudden heat from the flares was too much. The rocks broke free, and the thing fell. It scrambled for a grip, those long fingers scraping against stone, but there was nothing to hold on to. It fell past me, silent now. I watched it tumble down the cliff face, bouncing off rocks, until it disappeared into the darkness below. I didn't move for a long time, just stood there on that ledge, breathing hard, waiting to see if it would climb back up. It didn't. Finally, I started climbing down. It took me over an hour. By the time I reached the bottom, the sun was starting to rise. The storm had passed, and the sky was clear and cold. I found the thing's body at the base of the cliff. It was broken, twisted even more than before, but it was dead. I was sure of it. As I stood there looking at it, I noticed something. In the growing light, I could see its face more clearly. The monster features were fading. It was returning to its human form. An old man, thin and starved-looking, with a beard and hollow cheeks. He must have been up here for over 30 years. Alone, hungry, cursed. I whispered a prayer for him. It was all I could do. The helicopter found me 12 hours later. I was back at my station, wrapped in blankets, the generator keeping me warm. I'd managed to get the radio working and called for help. They asked me what happened. I told them about the missing hikers, about finding the boot, about the attack on my station. I told them I'd been chased by something, and I'd managed to escape. I didn't tell them about the Wendigo. Didn't tell them about the German prisoner who'd been turned into a monster. Who would believe that? They found the bodies of 3 hikers over the next week. The 4th was never recovered. They blamed it on the storm and wild animals. I didn't correct them. They also found the remains at the bottom of the cliff. The medical examiner said it appeared to be a very old body, probably from the POW camp era. They assumed it had been uncovered by erosion and frozen in the ice all these years. I didn't correct them about that either. I stayed on as a ranger for another 3 years after that. But I never went back to Dolly Sods. I couldn't. Every time I thought about those twisted spruce trees and the rocky outcrops, I'd see those yellow eyes staring at me from the darkness. I retired in 1986 and moved to West Virginia's eastern panhandle, where the land is gentle and civilized. I teach ecology at a small college now. I still love nature, but I respect it more than I used to. I understand that there are things in the wild places that we don't have names for. Things that used to be human. Things that hunger. Sometimes, late at night, I hear about disappearances in Monongahela National Forest. Hikers who never come back. Search parties that find nothing but traces of blood in the snow. And I wonder if I was wrong. If the thing I killed was the only one. Or if there were others, other prisoners who'd gotten hungry enough to cross that terrible line. Who'd been cursed and transformed and left to wander those hills forever. The Dolly Sods is still there, still isolated and wild. And sometimes, on winter nights when the wind is right, people say they can hear screaming from the plateau, voices calling for help that never comes. I tell myself it's just the wind, just the sound of air moving through rocks and ice. But I know better. I know that some hungers can never be satisfied, and some sins can never be forgiven. They just keep repeating, year after year, in the frozen places where civilization ends and the real wilderness begins. Last month, a colleague asked me if I wanted to lead a winter ecology trip to Dolly Sods. The university was offering extra pay. It would be good experience for the students, he said. I told him no, and when he asked why, I looked him in the eye and said, because some places aren't meant for us. Some places belong to something else. He laughed, thought I was joking. I wasn't. And if you're ever planning to hike in the Monongahela National Forest, especially the Dolly Sods Wilderness, I have one piece of advice. Don't go in winter. And if you do, if you're stubborn enough to ignore this warning, then at least bring flares. Lots of them. Because in those frozen heights, in those twisted forests where the rocks jut up like broken teeth, there's something that watches. Something that remembers what it was like to be human. Something that's always, always hungry. And the only thing it fears is the light. My name is James Holloway, and I've been a park ranger in the George Washington National Forest for 16 years. That's long enough to see pretty much everything these mountains can throw at you. Broken bones, bear attacks, hypothermia, rock slides. I've pulled more than 200 people out of situations they shouldn't have survived. But I never believed in ghosts. Never believed in the old stories my grandmother used to tell about mountain spirits and cave guardians. I figured the worst thing you'd find in a cave was bad air or loose rock. I was wrong. It was late October 1978, and the first frost had already hit the valley. I was working out of the ranger station near Devil's Backbone, a ridge system that runs along the Virginia highlands about 45 miles from the nearest real town. The trees were bare, and fog settled into the hollows every evening like milk poured into a bowl. I'd just finished my morning coffee when the call came in. A group of college kids, 5 of them were overdue from a spelunking trip. They'd signed out for Cave Hollow, a simple system we let beginners explore. Should have been back yesterday afternoon. Probably just lost track of time, my supervisor said over the radio. You know how kids are. I knew better. Cave Hollow was easy 2 main passages, no deep drops, well mapped. You'd have to try hard to get lost in there. Still, I grabbed my gear and headed out with my partner, a young ranger named Marcus Webb who'd only been on the job 2 years. The trail to Cave Hollow was a 3-mile hike through dense rhododendron thickets. The ground was hard with frost, and our breath came out in white clouds. Marcus kept checking his watch. 48 hours is a long time, he said. Yeah. Think they're hurt? Hope not. When we reached the cave entrance, I knew something was off. Their gear was scattered everywhere, backpacks dumped out, rope coiled on the ground, helmets lying in the biolite, dirt. But here's what made my stomach drop. This wasn't Cave Hollow. This was Devil's Throat, a cave system about half a mile west. A system we kept closed to the public. Why would they come here instead? Marcus asked. I picked up one of the helmets. The strap was torn, not unbuckled. Torn like someone had ripped it off in a hurry. Marcus, call for backup. Tell them we need a full cave rescue team. While he radioed, I walked the perimeter of the entrance. Devil's Throat opened into a steep limestone cliff, a black mouth about 15 feet high. The area around it was littered with broken equipment, a flashlight with the lens smashed, a water bottle crushed flat, a guidebook with pages torn out. Then I saw the marks on the rock face. They looked like claw marks, 4 deep grooves scraped into the limestone, running from about 7 feet high down to the ground. Fresh 2 white stone dust still clinging to the edges. What the hell makes marks like that? Marcus said, appearing at my shoulder. I don't know. But I did know that no bear could reach that high, and no mountain lion left marks that deep. I pulled out my compass to check our bearings before entering. The needle spun in wild circles, never settling on any direction. Your compass working? I asked Marcus. He checked his. Same thing, just spinning uselessly. Mineral deposits, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Limestone caves can have high iron content, messes with magnetic fields. Marcus nodded, but I could see he didn't quite believe it. Neither did I. I'd been in 100 caves around here, and I'd never seen anything like this. We geared up helmets with headlamps, rope systems, emergency medical supplies, standard cave rescue protocol. I tied into the rope first and started down into Devil's Throat. The temperature dropped as soon as we entered. Not gradually, it just fell like stepping into a freezer. Our breath turned to fog instantly. "Jesus, it's cold," Marcus said. The entrance passage sloped down at about 30 degrees, the ceiling pressing lower with every step. Our headlamps cut through the darkness, reflecting off wet limestone walls that glistened like something alive. 20 feet in, my headlamp flickered. "Check your light," I called back to Marcus. "Mine's doing it too." Both our lights dimmed to almost nothing, then surged back to full brightness. Then dimmed again. Not like dying batteries, more like something was interfering with them. "We should mark the walls," I said. Standard procedure in unfamiliar systems. I pulled out a piece of chalk and made an arrow pointing back toward the entrance. But when I looked at the wall, there were already marks there. Not arrows, symbols, carved deep into the stone, old enough that mineral deposits had partially filled them. Circles and lines and shapes that looked almost like letters but weren't any alphabet I recognized. We followed the main passage deeper. It split into 3 tunnels after about 50 yards. I knelt down, studying the ground with my headlamp. The floor here was mostly clay and small rocks. "Got footprints," I said. "Recent ones. At least 6 different boot treads, heading into the left tunnel. The college kids. But there was something else, bare footprints, if you could call them that. They were too long, too narrow, with only 4 toes instead of 5. And they were everywhere, crisscrossing the boot prints like something had been following the group. What kind of animal walks on 2 feet with 4 toes? Marcus whispered. "None that I know of." We entered the left tunnel. It narrowed quickly, forcing us to crouch, then crawl. My headlamp kept flickering. The beam would dim to almost nothing, and in those moments of near darkness, I'd hear things. Scratching sounds from deeper in the cave, whispers that weren't quite voices. The tunnel opened into a chamber about the size of my living room. Our light swept across limestone formations, stalactites hanging from the ceiling like teeth. Columns of stone rising from the floor. And equipment. Lots of it. A tent, partially set up. Sleeping bags torn open, insulation spilling out. A camping stove crushed flat. Food packages ripped apart and scattered. But no blood. No bodies. Just destruction. "They were camping here," Marcus said. "Why would they camp inside a closed cave system?" I picked up a torn notebook, its pages covered in handwriting. Most of it was standard cave exploration notes, measurements, sketches of passages, but the last few entries were different. Asterisk, found chamber, behind narrow passage. Symbols on walls. Sarah says they look like Cherokee writing. Asterisk, asterisk, heard sounds tonight. Like rocks hitting together. Coming from deeper in system. Tom wants to investigate. Asterisk, asterisk, something's wrong. The passages don't match our map. We're in the right cave, but everything's in the wrong place. Asterisk, the final entry was just one sentence, written in shaky letters. Asterisk, they're watching us. Asterisk, a sound echoed through the chamber. Tap, tap, tap. Stone hitting stone, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from somewhere ahead of us. Marcus grabbed my arm. "What is that?" "Stay here. Radio for the backup team. Tell them what we found." "You're not going alone." "That's an order, Marcus." I left him in the chamber and pushed forward into a narrow passage barely wide enough for my shoulders. The tapping continued, echoing off the walls, impossible to pinpoint. My headlamp dimmed again, and this time it stayed dim. The passage opened into another chamber, smaller than the last. My weak light barely reached the walls, but I could see enough. Symbols covered every surface, the same strange carvings we'd seen earlier, hundreds of them, carved deep into the limestone. In the center of the chamber sat a pile of stones arranged in a perfect circle, each stone about the mivulum, size of my fist, stacked 3 feet high, and around the circle, scattered like offerings, were items from the missing students, a watch, a camera, a necklace, boots arranged in a neat row, but no students. The tapping started again, right behind me. I spun around, my dim headlamp sweeping across the passage I'd just come through. Nothing there. Tap. 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 Now it was coming from above. I looked up, and I saw them. Pale shapes clinging to the ceiling of the cave, their bodies pressed flat against the stone. At first I thought they were some kind of albino animals. Their skin was translucent, white, so pale I could almost see through it to the rock behind them. Then one of them moved. It wasn't an animal. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with arms and legs that bent at strange angles. Its head turned toward me, and I saw eyes completely black. No whites, no iris, just darkness. My headlamp chose that moment to die completely. In the pitch darkness, I heard movement all around me. Scraping sounds as things climbed down from the ceiling. Footsteps that didn't sound quite human, and breathing wet, raspy breathing that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I fumbled for my backup flashlight, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. When I finally got it on, the beam was weak, but better than nothing. The chamber was empty. But the passage I'd come through was now blocked by a pile of stones, stacked from floor to ceiling, as if they'd been placed there in the few seconds I'd been in darkness. I ran to the barrier and started pulling rocks down. They were ice cold and wet. Behind me, I heard that sound again, tap, 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 getting closer. "Marcus!" I shouted. "Marcus, can you hear me?" No response. The rocks I was pulling down were being replaced from the other side, stacked back up as fast as I could move them. Something was deliberately keeping me trapped. I grabbed my radio. "This is Ranger Holloway. I'm trapped in Devil's Throat cave system, requesting immediate assistance, over." Only static answered. Then, through the static, I heard something else. A voice, but not speaking English. It sounded old, ancient, like words from a language that hadn't been spoken in centuries. The tapping surrounded me now. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. They were everywhere. Dozens of those pale figures, standing in a circle around me. They were even more horrible up close. Their skin looked paper thin, their limbs too long, their fingers ending in black nails like claws. They didn't blink, they just stared with those completely black eyes. One of them stepped forward. It was taller than the others, maybe 7 feet, and something that looked like jewelry made from bones and stones hung around its neck. It opened its mouth, and when it spoke, the words came out in broken, heavily accented English that sounded like it was being dragged up from the bottom of a well. "You should not be here." I pressed my back against the stone wall, flashlight shaking in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. "Where are the students?" I managed to ask. "The 5 college kids. Where are they?" The tall figure tilted its head, studying me like I was some kind of interesting insect. When it moved, it made no sound, just glided across the cave floor like it was floating. "They," disturbed. "Sacred ground." Its voice was like grinding rocks. "They," opened. "What should stay?" Closed. "They're just kids. They didn't know. Please, just tell me where they are." The creature's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. Deep. Very deep. Behind me, I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder. I jerked away, spinning around. Another one of those things stood inches from me, its black eyes reflecting my flashlight beam. "We are the Watchers," it said. "We guard the Nightland, always. We guard." My radio crackled to life. Marcus's voice came through, panicked and broken up. "James, can you? The chamber is, and they're coming up from." Then screaming. Marcus was screaming. The radio went dead. "No." I lunged toward the stone barrier, pulling at rocks with my bare hands. "Marcus, answer me." The tall creature grabbed my arm. Its grip was impossibly strong and so cold it burned. "Your friend is learning. Just as the others learned." I yanked my arm free, leaving skin behind, and ran. Not toward the barrier, but toward the only other passage out of the chamber, a narrow crack in the wall I'd barely noticed before. I squeezed through, my jacket tearing on sharp stone, my helmet scraping the ceiling. The passage twisted and turned, getting narrower, and I could hear them following me. Not running, they didn't need to run. They knew these caves. This was their home. My flashlight caught movement ahead. A figure, human-sized, stumbling toward me. For a second I thought it was Marcus. It wasn't. It was one of the college students, a girl, maybe 20 years old, wearing torn jeans and a flannel shirt. Her blonde hair was matted with cave mud, but her eyes were wrong. They stared straight ahead, not seeing me, not seeing anything. "Hey," I grabbed her shoulders. "Hey, can you hear me? What's your name?" She didn't respond. Her skin was ice cold. She was breathing, but shallow, like she was barely alive. When I shined my light in her eyes, the pupils didn't react. Behind us, that tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled the girl forward, half carrying her through the passage. Come on, we have to move. Can you walk? She moved like a puppet, her feet shuffling forward but her body stiff. We emerged into a larger tunnel, and I could see more passages branching off in every direction. My mental map of the cave system meant none of this matched what Devil's Throat was supposed to look like. Which way? I muttered. Which way is out? The girl's mouth opened. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. There is no out. The Watchers close the ways. They make the paths turn back. This is the Nightland now. That's not true. Every cave has an entrance. We're getting out. I picked a tunnel at random and started running, pulling the girl with me. The passage sloped upward. That was good. Had to be good. Up meant toward the surface. We ran for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber, the ceiling so high my flashlight couldn't reach it, and in the center of the chamber, I saw them. The other 4 students. They sat in a circle around another pile of stones, completely motionless. Their eyes were open but empty, just like the girl I'd found. They didn't react when we entered, didn't blink, didn't breathe. No, they were breathing. Barely. Slow, shallow breaths that came maybe once every 30 seconds. What did they do to you? I checked the closest one, a young man with a University of Virginia sweatshirt. His pulse was there but faint. His skin was freezing. Come on, wake up, all of you, wake up. The girl I'd been carrying suddenly spoke, her voice still flat and mechanical. We went too deep, found the burial chamber, took things. The Watchers came. They showed us the true paths. The paths that go down. Always down. Never up. Never out. Stop it, you're in shock. We're getting out of here. But even as I said it, I knew she was right about one thing: the cave was wrong. I'd been running upward, but somehow we'd ended up deeper. The air was thinner here, harder to breathe. And those symbols were everywhere, covering the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. A sound echoed through the chamber. Not tapping this time, singing. Or chanting. Multiple voices speaking in unison in that ancient language, the words rising and falling like a ritual. The Watchers emerged from every passage, dozens of them, surrounding the chamber. They stood at the edges, watching us with those black eyes, their pale bodies almost glowing in the darkness. The tall one, the leader, stepped forward. In its hands it held something wrapped in rotted cloth. It unwrapped it carefully, revealing human bones. Old bones, brown with age. Cherokee, it said. My people. Before we became this. It gestured at itself with one elongated hand. We were chosen. To guard, to watch, to keep the deep places closed. You're Cherokee? I stared at it, trying to see anything human in those features. Were. Long ago. Before the white men, before the wars. We went into the earth. To hide the sacred things, to protect them. But we stayed too long. The Nightland changed us. It knelt down, placing the bones on the ground. Your kind always comes, always disturbs, takes what is not theirs. So we teach, we show them the deep paths, the dark ways, until they understand, until they join. I looked at the 5 students, sitting motionless in their circle. You're turning them into Watchers. Yes, they will. Guard, as we guard. Forever. No. I pulled my climbing knife from my belt. I'm taking them out of here. The leader laughed. It was a horrible sound, like rocks sliding down a mountain. You cannot fight the Nightland. It is older than mountains, deeper than the earth's bones. The other Watchers moved closer, forming a tighter circle. I grabbed the closest student and hauled him to his feet. He stood but didn't help, his body limp and unresponsive. That's when I remembered my grandmother's stories. She'd told me about things that lived in caves, spirits that protected sacred places. She'd said they feared 3 things: bright light, iron, and running water. My headlamp was dead, but I had my knife iron and steel. And somewhere in this cave system, there had to be an underground stream. Caves always had water. I held the knife out in front of me. The watchers stopped moving, their black eyes fixed on the blade. Iron? The leader hissed. Old iron, cold iron, it hurts. Yeah? Then back off. I pulled the student toward the nearest passage, keeping the knife extended. The watchers parted, giving me space but following. I grabbed another student, then another, pushing them ahead of me like a shepherd with zombie sheep. The passages twisted and split, and I followed my instincts where the air felt fresher, where I could hear the faintest sound of moving water. The watchers followed but kept their distance, afraid of the knife. Then I heard it, the sound of running water echoing somewhere ahead. I pushed the students faster, my heart pounding. We stumbled into a passage where water ran along the floor, maybe 3 inches deep, flowing downward. Downward. Toward an exit, hopefully. I forced the students to walk through the stream, the cold water splashing over our boots. The watchers followed along the dry edges of the passage, unable or unwilling to touch the flowing water. They hissed and clicked their tongues, speaking to each other in that ancient language. The water flows out, the leader called from behind us. But you cannot follow. The ways are closed. I ignored it and pushed forward. The passage got smaller, the water deeper. Soon we were wading through water up to our knees. The students moved like sleepwalkers, barely aware of what was happening. Then the passage ahead collapsed into a wall of stone and mud. A dead end. I spun around. The watchers stood behind us, blocking our retreat. They'd herded us here deliberately, leading us to a trap. There is no escape, the leader said. The Nightland decides who leaves. You, disturbed sacred ground. You must stay. We didn't disturb anything. The kids were stupid, yeah, but they don't deserve this. Sacred ground was opened. The burial chamber was violated. Balance must be restored. I looked at the wall ahead of us, then at the water flowing past our legs. Water flowing out. Which meant there was a way through, maybe underwater. Can you swim? I asked the students. None of them answered. They just stared with those empty eyes. No choice. I took a deep breath and ducked under the water, feeling along the wall. My hand found an opening, low and narrow. I came up gasping. There's a way through, under the water, we're going through it. The water passage is too long, the leader said. You will drown. Maybe. But I'd rather drown trying to escape than become one of those things. I grabbed the first student and pulled him under with me. We squeezed through the underwater passage, my lungs already burning. It was pitch black, the water freezing, my flashlight useless underwater. I felt with my hands, pulling us through. Just when I thought my lungs would burst, the passage opened up. We surfaced in a pool of water, in a chamber lit by thin streams of daylight from above. Daylight. An exit. I went back for the others, one by one, dragging them through the underwater passage. The girl. The second guy. The third. On the fourth trip, my flashlight died completely, and I had to navigate by feel alone. The last student, a boy with dark hair, fought me when I tried to grab him. His empty eyes suddenly focused, and he spoke in a voice that wasn't his own. You cannot save them all. One must remain. One must take the place. Like hell. I yanked him under the water. Halfway through the passage, he grabbed my jacket and wouldn't let go. We struggled in the darkness, in the freezing water, my lungs screaming for air. I managed to get my knife and cut myself free from my own jacket, leaving it behind with him still holding on. I surfaced alone, gasping and coughing. The 4 students I'd saved sat around the edge of the pool, motionless. I couldn't go back for the 5th one. Didn't have the air, didn't have the strength. I told myself he was already gone, that the thing speaking through him wasn't the student anymore. But I still hear him sometimes, in my dreams, calling for help from underwater. The chamber had a natural chimney leading up, narrow but climbable. I rigged a rope system using what gear I had left and hauled the students up one at a time. They didn't help. They just hung there like dead weight while I pulled. When we finally emerged onto the surface, it was twilight. We were about 2 miles from the cave entrance where we'd started, which was impossible. The cave system wasn't that big. But nothing about this made sense anymore. Marcus was waiting at the original entrance with the rescue team. He had a bandage wrapped around his head and his arm in a sling, but he was alive. "James!" He ran toward us. "We thought you were dead." The whole chamber collapsed. I barely got out. I looked at the 4 students. They stood in a line, staring at nothing. "We need to get them to a hospital, now." But even as we loaded them into the rescue vehicles, I knew no hospital could fix what was wrong with them. They'd been in the Nightland, they'd seen the Watchers. You don't come back from that the same. Later, at the hospital, the doctors couldn't explain it. The students were physically healthy, cold, and dehydrated, but healthy. But they wouldn't speak, wouldn't react to anything. Their families came, crying and hugging them, and the students just stared with empty eyes. After 2 weeks, they started to respond, started to talk, started to eat on their own. But they remembered nothing about the caves, nothing about the Watchers, nothing about being trapped underground, except at night. At night they'd wake up screaming about pale things in the darkness, about being pulled deeper and deeper into the earth, about voices teaching them songs in a language they didn't know. And one thing they all said, every single one of them: "We left someone behind, we left him in the water." They closed Devil's Throat officially. Geological instability, the report said. Risk of collapse. They sealed the entrance with concrete and steel bars and posted warning signs. But I know the truth. It wasn't to keep people out. It was to keep something in. I went back once, alone, 3 months later. The Cherokee symbols I'd seen in the cave, I needed to know what they meant. I found an elder from the Eastern Band, a woman in her 80s who still spoke the old language. I showed her drawings I'd made of the symbols. Her face went pale. "Where did you see these?" "In a cave, on Devil's Backbone." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My grandmother told me stories about the Ani Gaiha, the cave people. Long ago, when the Cherokee were driven from their lands, some chose to hide. They went deep into the earth, into places where the white men wouldn't follow. They made a pact with the spirits of the deep places. They would guard the sacred burial grounds, protect the old bones, keep the ancient ways alive. What happened to them? The earth changed them, made them part of the stone and darkness. They became watchers, neither living nor dead, neither human nor spirit, forever guarding, forever waiting. Can they be stopped?" She shook her head. "They are the mountain now. You cannot stop the mountain." I still work as a ranger. Still do cave rescues, but I follow the old rules now. Before I enter any cave system, I say a Cherokee prayer my grandmother taught me. I carry iron tools. I never go deep. And I pay attention to the signs. If your compass spins, if your lights flicker, if you hear tapping sounds like stones hitting together, if you see symbols you don't recognize carved into the walls, leave immediately. Don't ask questions. Don't investigate. Because some caves aren't just holes in the ground. Some are doorways to older places, darker places. Places where the rules are different, where things that were human once still guard and watch and wait. The 4 students I rescued, they're alive. Living normal lives, mostly, but they never go underground. Not basements, not subways, not tunnels. And every October, when the frost comes to the mountains, they all report the same dream. They're back in the cave, walking deeper and deeper. And pale figures walk beside them, teaching them songs, showing them the old ways, inviting them to stay, to join, to watch. One of them called me last week, said she was thinking about going back to the cave, said the dreams were getting stronger, said sometimes she hears the tapping even when she's awake. I told her to move, get as far from the mountains as possible. But I know it won't matter. The Nightland doesn't forget. The Watchers are patient. They've been waiting for thousands of years. They can wait a little longer. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it too. Tap, 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 like stones hitting together, coming from deep under the ground. They're still watching. They're always watching. And there's still one student down there, the one I couldn't save, the one who took my place so the others could leave. Sometimes I wonder if he's still himself, or if he's become one of them. If he's standing in some dark chamber right now, pale and cold and patient, waiting for the next person who goes too deep, the 5th Watcher, the newest guardian of the Nightland. My name is James Holloway, and I've been a park ranger for 16 years. I've seen a lot of things in these mountains. But there are some things you can't unsee. Some places you can't leave behind. Even when you're standing in sunlight, you carry the darkness with you. And the watchers? They're still down there. Still guarding, still waiting, still watching.